The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
Can governments remake capitalism to serve the needs of citizens better? Economist Mariana Mazzucato shoots for the stars in her new book. She'll walk us through that moonshot vision tonight. Then we'll hear from writer John Colapinto on his fascinating inquiry into how the human voice works and conveys so much even beyond our words. It's Thursday, June 17th, and that's next on The Agenda. It's often said that government should create the conditions for business to succeed and then get out of the way. But according to economist Mariana Mazzucato, that's both totally wrong-headed and a dead end for prosperity. Her new book explains why and sees quite a different trajectory for the future of capitalism. She is a professor at University College London and founding director of its Institute for Innovation and Public Purpose. The new book is called Mission Economy, a moonshot guide to changing capitalism. And it brings Mariana Mazzucato on the line from London, UK, back to our studio. So nice to see you again. Come va?
You too. Fantastico. I mean, it's all relative, isn't it? It's great to see you, but I think globally we're all not doing too well, are we?
Well,
we last saw each other, for sure.
Since the last time, for sure, but getting better, let's hope. You have, I guess I should start by saying, Professor, you have set a modest little goal of rethinking capitalism in the hopes that countries worldwide are actually going to do government differently. And I wonder why you didn't find that mission just utterly and completely daunting to set out on.
Well, first of all, when we use the word capitalism, I think we forget that there's different ways to do capitalism. There's varieties of capitalism. And I think we have the wrong one in many countries. And I think the COVID-19 pandemic just completely woke us up to just how badly prepared we are. We weren't even able to produce pretty basic stuff like personal protection equipment, enough of it for frontline workers, at least in the first lockdown. We have a digital divide, which means that so many young people who have been locked down from school have not accessed their human right to education. We have a vaccine, but that's not enough if it's actually not globally accessible. So, in terms of how we produce, how we distribute, but also how we consume, there's huge lessons to learn. And I think, the fact that 51 years ago, we did something incredibly hard as humanity. We put a man on the moon and also brought him, at the time they were all boys, now we're getting girls on the moon, back as well. That was much harder than PPE, but it's actually easier than some of the more kind of social missions. So what I try to do in the book is to say, let's break down what actually got us to the moon in terms of how government and business interacted, how they co-invested, how there was much less ideology. You had a government that was directing the show, but lots of private sector innovation and investment before public goal. And what would it look like to apply that to the 17 Sustainable Development Goals?
Well, we got to the moon in 1970, I guess the Americans got to the moon in 1970, but of course President Kennedy set out the goal almost a decade earlier, and he wanted it done regardless of the cost because he said it was just something we had to do. Do we still think that way today?
Absolutely not. In fact, if you read the different speeches he gave in 61 and 62, the words he used were like, we're going to do it because it's hard, not because it's easy. And we might even screw up along the way. Well, he didn't say screw up, but he said we might make mistakes along the way. It's going to cost a lot of money. So that kind of welcoming of uncertainty, of experimentation, of trial and error, and also having kind of an approach to the budget, which one could call an outcomes-oriented budget. Right? You focus on the goal and then you backtrack and say, how much will it cost? And that's just going to be what it costs. But especially setting it up in such an ambitious way, which required investment in innovation in so many different sectors, not just aeronautics. There was innovation in nutrition and materials, electronics, software. The entire software industry was actually a spillover in some ways of that Apollo program. But also, there was failure along the way. So the Apollo 1 tragedy. And those 3 astronauts who died, what was so interesting, well, it's tragic, but still quite interesting that one of the astronauts, Gus Grissom, before dying on that day, said, how are we going to get to the moon when we can't even communicate between 3 buildings? Because he couldn't hear what was being said to him. on the, on the lunar module from the mission control room. And, basically all these kind of government silos and these different kind of parts of government today, which we know don't work together. He was reflecting on that, on how badly NASA within a square kilometer was communicating between its buildings. And that caused a massive shakeup within NASA to actually, think about its own internal structure in order to be what I call mission oriented. And so today, where there's trillions being poured into the system with COVID-19 recovery funds, it's really important to remember that it's not enough to kind of have helicopter money, right? Just have a lot of public money in the system if the actual capacity on the ground within our public institutions isn't fit for purpose. And as Obama once said, the last time we reinvented government was in the era of black and white TV. So instead of just thinking government's part of the problem, or at best it's part of the solution, right? These kind of dichotomous ways of thinking about government. What does it actually mean to have an ambitious government that works hand in hand with the private sector, of course, but to fulfill serious public goals? What does it mean for organizational capacity? What does it mean for actually organizing a partnership that's truly symbiotic and not what I would call parasitic, which is what we often have in the health innovation space, where you have, billions of public funds going in, and then somehow the drugs that are produced, or at least co-produced with public money, aren't accessible to citizens, whether it's because they're overpriced or if the intellectual property rights often get abused. So, a lot of these kind of intricate questions are the ones I think we should be asking on the back of COVID-19, but also, of course, the climate crisis, which is the other massive, crisis that is on top of this current health pandemic.
I am going to follow up on those questions, but I don't want to leave NASA just yet, because there's a story in your book. It's 1962. JFK is touring NASA, and he meets a janitor. And he asked the janitor, "What's your job here?" And he said, "Well, Mr. President, I'm helping get a man on the moon." What's the significance of that story?
Well, we should be careful, because on the one hand, the significance of that story is that it was a really inspirational mission. I mean, you'll remember also all those pictures of, humans all over the globe looking up, right, at the sky during, the moon landing. On the other hand, there was real tensions on Earth at the time. You'll remember there was, the whole civil rights movement. And people within the civil rights movement arguing, why are we spending billions in space when we have hunger, poverty, and racism on Earth? So it wasn't, exactly a linear process, but it surely was a period where we had much more leadership. In some ways, there was also more debate, less also the ideological debate than we have today. But one of the points I make is that even those who believe in government, forget the kind of Reaganite, Thatcherite kind of view of government, just get out of the way. Even those who believe in it continue, some of the progressive economists too, to talk about it as just, fixing market failures. And what was interesting at the time of Apollo is that it was a real example of what I've been speaking about for some time, even on your show, which is we need governments that co-create and co-shape markets to fulfill goals and actually achieve an economy that's more inclusive and sustainable. And if you're just always patching things up, first of all, it's not inspirational. It doesn't get the janitor to say, oh yeah, I'm doing that too, right? Whereas the moon mission was so inspirational that did speak to many people, notwithstanding the tensions as well. But it's also about what are the tools that are needed on Earth in order to galvanize and catalyze as many different actors across different industries, but also different public-private areas. What are the modern day missions? Whether it's getting plastic out of the ocean, if we think of a big global mission, whether it's a carbon neutral kind of city agenda, but then just coming back to your question, what does it mean to bring citizens who live in cities, as an example, to the table? So the missions themselves are not handed down top down by the equivalent of a local Kennedy, but are actually truly co-created. And I think if you think back to the whole Black Lives Matter movement, the Fridays for the Future movement, these kids who've been striking on Fridays following Greta Thunberg's lead, but also the Me Too movement, there's something about remembering that social movements have in the history of capitalism often made our world better. We wouldn't have the weekend. We wouldn't have the 8-hour workday without trade unions. We wouldn't have, votes for women and for Black people without the civil rights movement and the feminist movement. So what does it mean for missions to be co-created also alongside movements that are fighting for real change? I think that's another big question that the book at least tries to set out.
Well, if I can put it this way, you have been beating the drum for many years to look at governments and bureaucrats, not just as market fixers and meddlers and so on, but as as co-creators and partners in the economy. How would you say that mission of yours is going so far?
Well, I think, again, since we last spoke, and we've spoken at least twice before, it's definitely picked up, especially in a moment like this where government is back. Just think of the Biden Build Back Better agenda. It's close to $4 trillion. Just after some years, we were told there was no money, right? Money is always created when we want to go to war. And it's also created on the back of crises, but that's too late. You can't wait for something like a COVID-19 crisis to produce the tragedy it has to decide that we need to invest in the economy. So how do we, learn that this can't just be in war moments or big project moments like an Apollo program or a crisis moment, but a more continual way to remember that we have lots of different problems and we need to focus on those problems and work backwards on what does it mean for the budget? What does it mean for all the tools, the grants, the loans, the procurement policies, for example, to galvanize that bottom-up experimentation. But I think one of the areas where we always kind of push against, again, a wall is when all of a sudden someone will say, like we're hearing already, oh, okay, fine. It was fine to do it during the crisis, but now we need to tighten our belts again. Public budgets are, skyrocketing. And let's, perhaps implement, they don't use the word anymore because it's out of fashion, but basically an austerity policy to bring down the public deficit. And I'm really hoping that this time around it doesn't happen. We know that doesn't work. Even the IMF and the World Bank that were behind, the kind of Washington consensus ideology have admitted it doesn't work. Italy, where I'm from and you're kind of from, has had a low deficit actually for 20 years, but a very high debt to GDP. And people sometimes forget the two things aren't the same thing. If you're not actually having strategic, mission-oriented, innovative public investment, and the same thing on the private sector, if we don't have reinvestment of profits and just have a lot of value extraction, say, through share buybacks, then you don't actually have that kind of long-run driver of GDP growth. We don't increase productivity. We don't also steer that economy in ways that we think are, strategic. And so you can have a high debt to GDP because that denominator is not growing, even though your deficit is relatively low. And that is the case in most of the European southern peripheral countries, Portugal, Italy, Greece, and Spain. They have relatively low deficits, but very high debt to GDP. So hopefully this time around, we won't then, on the back of this crisis, say, okay, job done, start cutting your deficit again. Because that's what made this crisis much worse than it had to be, on the back of cutting, for example, investments in our health systems.
Well, let me give another example that you do talk about in the book, and that is we go back to the Obama administration, and there were people who were looking for the administration to become a much greater partner in, for example, the new electricity sources of the future. And there was this company called Solyndra, which the Obama administration loaned hundreds of millions of dollars to in order to get it off the ground. And of course, it didn't work. How do you make the case for increased and improved partnerships between the public and private sector while acknowledging at the same time that from time to time, you're going to lose billions of dollars along the way, and that's the cost of doing business?
So I think there's kind of two or three different points to unpack there. The first is exactly the point you've just made, which I also opened up with, which is to say that, the moon landing itself required a lot of trial and error. And if they were worried about failing, they should have never begun, and they would have never begun, right? They knew actually that it required experimentation. And we no longer think that way. As soon as a public servant or a politician makes a big mistake, it's bang in the front page of the newspaper. Here in the UK, it would be the Daily Mail, right? And then arguing that, oh, that's another example of rubbish government. Just stop, get government out of the way, or at best, fix that market failure and then get out of the way. But the other point is, once you do fail, because that is normal, you wouldn't know how to ride a bike if you didn't fall off sometimes, are you actually investing in learning from that failure? So learning by doing assumes you're trying to learn. And instead, what we've seen in so many different governments is the outsourcing of their own capacity to the McKinseys, the PricewaterhouseCoopers, the Deloittes. So that over-consultification of the public brain to consulting companies or the private sector caused what recently a Tory lord in the UK government, Lord Agnew, called the infantilization of the public sector. But third, if you are going to, again, think in this portfolio kind of mindset way that I've, again, been advocating for some time, to be an investor first resort, not a lender last resort, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. It's not about just doing offshore wind or just investing in a company like Solyndra. You require a portfolio approach. And what is interesting with the Obama example you just gave is they did actually have a portfolio approach. The same amount of money that went to Solyndra, or just about the same, went to Tesla. And we all think Tesla was a huge private sector kind of, genius Elon Musk success. But without that early guaranteed loan for $465 million by the Department of Energy, the Tesla kind of experimenting car would not have taken off. And yet what happened then was that Solyndra failed. Tesla was a success. The taxpayer was asked to bail out Solyndra and not get any of the direct shares, if you want, from the Tesla success. And what I, again, argued back then was that makes no sense. And in fact, Obama did something which really made no sense. So the DOE at the time said to Tesla, to Elon Musk, if you don't pay back the loan, we get 3 million shares in your company. So that's not what you want to do. You don't want 3 million shares in a crappy company that doesn't pay back the loan. The loan was paid off, and had they, based on that, received the 3 million shares, the price per share went from 9 to 90 between 2009 and 2013. That difference, multiplied by the 3 million shares they wanted, would have more than paid back the Solyndra loss and the next round of investment. But that requires you as a public servant, as a minister, whatever, to see yourself as a public venture capitalist and to make sure that citizens aren't just socializing the risks and then we privatize the rewards, but we actually find a way to socialize both. And that means, we can do that in all sorts of different ways. We can do it through equity stakes, something that, by the way, even the FT, Financial Times, is saying that we should have today with all these bailout programs. It could be based on conditionality to make sure that when you do receive those kinds of public loans, you make sure that the profits are reinvested back in the economy and not just used for share buybacks, or also conditions on the intellectual property rights, which again are often really abused in the public side of that contract, because a patent is a 20-year monopoly, basically profit contract between the state and business, that we actually structure those patents to make sure that what the state gets back is kind of a fair share of the deal instead of a rent-seeking kind of scam as it often is.
It is interesting what we either do or don't have money for these days. And I guess I note a few years ago, before the pandemic hit, the budget deficit of the government of Canada was about $35 billion a year. And then it went to $350 billion with COVID. And nobody batted an eyelid. Like, there was nobody saying we shouldn't do that. There's a chart in your book I want to bring up right now, and I'm going to just go into this in some detail for those listening on podcast and who can't say it. We're looking at the cost comparison of major U.S. government expenditures, and we're just going to go down the list here. The F-22 Raptor program, not very much. Future moon return for NASA, not very much. The Apollo program, again, not very much, relatively speaking. The federal debt interest in 2008, not very much. The interstate highway system, okay, we're getting into some serious money here, but not as much as was spent on the Vietnam War, and not as much as was spent on the financial bailout of 2008. And then the last line on the chart, the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, I mean, that bar goes all the way across from left to right and dwarfs everything else in comparison. What does this chart tell you about what we do and what we don't apparently have money for?
Well, first, it reminds us that, unfortunately, when it has to do with war, no one ever says, oh, sorry, we can't go. There's no money. Money is created. And that theoretically is an important point. Practically, we see it historically in the figure you just read out. But theoretically, that means actually when we really care about something like winning the war, we find the money. So the lesson is, does that mean we actually don't care about all these other things that we haven't found the money? For example, really strengthening our welfare states, whether it's public transport, public education, one of the great levelers when it works well, public health. Had this globally, if you think about it on public health, had this crisis begun in Africa, where many African countries have really weak health systems, we would all globally be worse off. And again, I really hope that's one of the big lessons. And by the way, I'm actually chairing a World Health Organization Council on the Economics of Health for All, precisely thinking about these questions. And it's only women in the council. Thank you. And if you ask me why, I'll say why not, but you haven't asked me, so I've just said that anyway. So, do we care about a stronger health system, really strong and well-structured, reimagined, well-designed, creative public education system? If we do, we should be finding the money for it. But we always, for these kinds of social concerns, we're told, oh, there's no money, sorry. Or here's a bit of money and you got to, divide it up between these different areas and these kind of false trade-offs, either public education or public health or public transport. And so I think, hopefully that's going to be, again, a big wake-up call, because the amount of money, especially from the US, that's going into this Build Back Better agenda and the kind of green infrastructure plan is just, much, much higher than just a year or two ago we were talking about, even from the kind of left side of the Democratic Party. And same thing right now in the UK. We have the Tory government doing what, the Labour government would have never even dreamed of doing because of that kind of ideological backdrop. But as I've already said, it's not enough to just do it in a crisis and then go back to normal as soon as that crisis is over. That's precisely what causes often these different types of crises.
You have, I learned in the book, you've been consulting to governments all over the world. And I want to just do one example here, because you're helping the British government with a big mission. And let's put that mission up on the screen here. By 2040, to put the UK at the forefront of safe, sustainable, universally accessible travel, creating congestion and admission-free zero accident systems. That is a mission statement. How do you even begin to think about achieving something that big?
Well, let me give you the background. What existed before that was the UK industrial strategy, which is similar to many different countries' industrial strategies, including in Canada, where someone will make up this false list of sectors that require financing. In the UK, in the previous industrial strategy, before we did this work, those sectors were, let me see if I can remember, automobiles, aeronautics, life sciences, the creative industries, and financial services. And so my work, when I was working on this kind of mission-oriented approach, which is then why I wrote the book to kind of tell the story in more lay language, was saying, that's a random list of sectors. There's lots of sectors not there. And, some of those that are there probably lobbied their way into being on that list. What if you reversed it? What if you said, what are the problems we're facing? And then get all the different sectors to work together to solve those problems, guided by government precisely in terms of designing an industrial strategy, a procurement strategy, an innovation strategy that really fosters that intersectoral collaboration. So at the back of that work with the UK government, we set up these kind of 4 big challenges, which were around the future of mobility, which is a challenge. The mission you read out was the mission statement beneath that challenge. Healthy aging, clean growth, and then the kind of opportunities around AI and the data society for the welfare state. And that mission statement you read out was not my mission statement. It was work done with a lot of civil servants in the Ministry for Innovation and Industry. What was so interesting about it, I think, was that, we had to keep kind of pushing them to be really ambitious. So, for example, to say that the public transport system would be 100% accessible, or that word accessible, the adjective fully accessible that you read out, that means that some of those bottom-up projects, those kind of spillovers that happen along the way, would have to come from the area of disabilities, right? There's lots of different ways to get up a ramp or to, enter the tube, the subway system. And often, these it's not even just public transport, all sorts of transport systems are not actually accessible. So if you say 100% accessible, 100% congestion free, 100%, whatever it is, that's a very clear target. Also, if you put in a certain number of years, right? So in 5 years, we will have 100 carbon neutral cities across Europe. That was one of the mission statements I worked on with the European Commission. Or getting 90% of the plastic out of our oceans globally. That would be something that you'd need a global organization like the United Nations, for example, to help try to foster. It'd be very hard for any one country to get the plastic out, given that the water moves. But the idea of having a very targeted goal is that we have to be able to answer, did we achieve it or not? Had the Apollo program just said, beat the Russians, Sputnik, space race, nothing would have happened. They had to be very clear, getting to the moon and back again in 1 generation before the end of the decade. And they did it, even though some say it never happened, but that's a conspiracy theory we won't go into.
But I can think of, I'm exaggerating a little bit here, but only for effect. I can think of 1,000 reasons why that mission we just talked about couldn't happen. Can you give me one reason why you think it could?
Well, let me, sorry, I know you're supposed to question me, but why do you think it couldn't happen? Think of all the different things that do happen. I mean, even the COVID vaccine that happened in such a short amount of time, just because there was an urgency for it. Under normal circumstances, it could have taken 5, 10 years, right? So coming back to the question of how much urgency, how much interest do we even have in creating a congestion-free and fully accessible, say, transport system? Where there's a will, there's a way. The problem is that most government policies end up just being handouts, guarantees, subsidies. In Italian, piove sussidi. I keep bringing out a bit of Italian because you and I usually do a bit of that fish called Wanda moment in our interviews. But it rains down subsidies, and the problem in Italy is not the lack of a public sector; it's just a very kind of inertial public sector that just gives out money, even through the Italian public bank. It's just been giving out a lot of money for industries to stay in place. Whereas in Germany, just to come to a very concrete example, what's recently happened is they did have very strong conditionalities through their public bank when the steel sector, right, asked for a loan, as steel does ask for help all over the world because steel as a sector is having trouble. Instead of just giving it money to bail it out because it's having troubles, that would be the old style industrial strategy. The German government, because they did have this kind of green strategy sitting at the national level called the Energiewende, created a loan program that was conditional on the steel sector and other sectors too, reducing their material content, which then the steel sector had to do, not because they went to Davos and talked about purpose or stakeholder value, but they had to do even to get €1, And they did it through repurpose, reuse, and recycle technologies across their whole value chain. Today, they have one of the greenest, most sustainable steel productions in the world because they had to in order to meet that kind of public challenge. So if an industrial strategy has a very clear goal, like a zero accident, congestion-free, fully accessible system, that becomes the way that the public purse, through the loans, the guarantees, and the procurement strategies, interacts with business. That's a very different type of relationship than we currently have, where even with, in some countries with the COVID-19 recovery funds, they're just bailouts. In the UK, we bailed out EasyJet, one of our airlines, no conditions attached. Whereas in France, just to remind us that things can be done in different ways, the loan to Air France was conditional on the company actually committing to reducing their carbon emissions.
I can't believe how fast the time has gone here. I'm literally down to my last 30 seconds, which is enough time, and this is plucked right out of the book. Enough time for you to tell us why we don't want to be idiots in this world. Right?
Well, you said it perfectly. I mean, we can't afford to. I mean, just look at the mess we've gotten ourselves into. And the main thing is to learn. Let's learn from the mistakes we've made. Instead of being pessimists, let's be optimists. We've just gone through an incredibly terrible moment. Let's learn from it, learning by doing. And if we don't learn from this and we, next month or in a year say, okay, now it's time to tighten our belts, we will be the idiots that you say we shouldn't be. And unfortunately, that's going to set up the next crisis because we're going to weaken all those kind of systems which underlie, an ambitious mission. You can't have a health-related mission with a weak health system.
I have time left enough to name the book, Mission Economy, A Moonshot Guide to Changing Capitalism. I have enough time left to say, grazie mille, dottoressa. And one last thing, buon compleanno. Happy birthday yesterday.
Oh, thank you so much.
Ci vediamo, alla prossima volta. Some of the most interesting books take on a subject that people rarely think about, even as they rely on it daily. For many reasons, John Colapinto's new book rises quickly up the list of the best of those. It's called This is the Voice, and it's about the extraordinary mechanics and significance of the sound made by our vocal cords. And John Colapinto joins us now from the Upper East Side of Manhattan Island in New York City. It's nice to meet you. How you doing?
Likewise, Steve. Thank you so much.
I want to take you back to a moment that I know was, I presume, the basis for this book and a really scary moment for you. A lot of us take our voices for granted, but your voice failed you at a moment when you really needed it. Want to hit that story to us?
Yes, about 20 years ago, I was working for Rolling Stone magazine at the time. Jan Wenner, the owner, decided to put together a rock band. And we were going to perform for a huge party of about 2,000 people, lots of them celebrities. I'm an amateur singer. I don't really know how to warm up my voice. Certainly didn't know back then. And I oversang in rehearsals. And as we ticked down to the actual date of the performance, I realized my voice was going. I couldn't get the high notes as readily, as easily. The power was somewhat compromised. But when I did the performance, I just blew it out as hard as I could and managed to do what I had to do. But it was really after that that I realized I had damaged my voice. I'd been hoarse in the past after singing. This was a different story.
Well, I gather it was a sort of a serendipitous meeting with somebody in an elevator that actually prompted you to look into what was seriously going on there, right?
Correct. I was doing what I tend to do, which is ignore the problem. I got in my elevator. It was a new building that we had just moved into. A nice neighbor got in. I said, "What you say in New York? What floor?" Because you're going to push the number for them. And it just took those two words. And she said, "Oh, you have a very serious voice injury." And I tried to sort of laugh it off. And she said, No. I can really see like you're doing things with your muscles in your neck to compensate. She actually diagnosed that I was probably feeling some pain in my neck. The vocal cords have no pain receptors. This was muscular pain from overcompensating to sort of try to make the sound work. She said, you're probably tired. Oh, yeah. And she said, because all your bodies, all the muscles in our upper body sort of work to produce the voice. And that's by driving our diaphragm and controlling our breathing. And I said, yeah, as a matter of fact, I'm tired all the time. She said, well, this is your vocal problem. And, I sort of believed it, wasn't sure. It was when she hinted that it might actually be a cancerous growth on my vocal cord that I went to the doctor the very next day. He put a laryngoscope down my throat that has a light on the end of it, and he photographed my vocal cords, and he did reveal that, thank goodness, it was not a malignant cancer or something. Instead, it was this sort of scar tissue. They call it a polyp. And it's like a lump on the edge of one of the vocal cords. It's really from bleeding. It's like an untreated bleed into the vocal cord, which I had induced by this over singing.
And who was she?
Yeah, great. She was, as it turned out, a vocal coach with Broadway singers and actors. And she had said that at the time. And I went, oh, cool. I didn't know much about her. I later looked her up. And she was like actually, when I was doing this book, I sort of thought, I better find out Andrea's credentials. And she actually works with a vocal coach who was world famous, Kristen Linklater, she recently died. She died, I think, this last summer. And she actually has like a network of vocal coaches around the world that actually teach something called freeing the natural voice. And that alone might almost suggest that this is about her teaching people to relax, not push the voice, as I was certainly doing. But she also teaches all sorts of methods for sort of bringing out who you are through the vocal signal. And that connected exactly with what I ended up writing about in this book.
Now, I know you're a Canadian originally, but you've been in New York for several decades. So I got to hit you with this Tom Seaver story. You'll know Tom Seaver, the former, all-world pitcher with the New York Mets. And I remember talking to him once, and he said, every time I go to bed, I'm afraid, because if I roll over on my pitching arm and do something to my arm, that's my career. And I wonder whether you felt that same experience through the course of your life, that, maybe this is the speech, maybe this is the song, maybe this is the interview that I'm going to give, and my voice is going to go, and that's it. And you need your voice to do your job. You ever experienced that?
Well, yes, in a sense, but I always know at the end of the day, as a print journalist, which has been my main activity, that, what really is going to matter is what I get on the page, the voice that I create on the page. But to your point, I'm not writing anything unless I'm doing a lot of interviews. And, before Zoom, I was doing those interviews over the phone. And yes, my feeling was that if I had a badly degraded vocal signal, that was really going to affect how interviews rolled out. So for instance, if I was interviewing someone and I had done this, child had been killed in a gun incident, I want to create empathy, sympathy. I want to seem like a sympathetic person that this person can open up to and speak about the worst tragedy in their life. Now, I'm not saying that someone that speaks like this doesn't sound sympathetic, but I was a little bit worried that I was going to sound like either a gangster that was going to bump them off, or someone that smokes 6 packs of cigarettes a day. I guess what I'm saying is, yes, my voice as a journalist was tremendously and is tremendously important to me as almost an instrument of, if I can say so, seduction, getting people to open up, trust me, or even talk to me in the first place. So yes, there was that worry.
You and I have never met before, and I must confess, after reading the book, I was curious to hear what your voice now would sound like, given the trauma it has been through. And I sure notice you have a raspy voice. Do you notice it anymore?
I do, and I'm particularly noticing it now because I want my voice to be smooth right now, but it changes day to day. Depending on what I've done the day before, if I've done a lot of talking, if I've dared to sing, which I try not to now, but this vocal polyp, this little mass on my vocal cord, it actually bangs against the healthy vocal cord and can make that one swell. So then my voice will be worse the next day. It could be bad for a week, depending on how much abuse I put my voice through. Now, what this means is that this is always on my mind. I mean, I wondered what I would sound like today. Wasn't entirely sure. I've been writing this morning, not using my voice much. So I'm surprised to discover, Steve, as I speak to you, that yeah, there's more rattle there than I wish. However, it underlines the point of the book.
Mm-hmm. And yet you have opted not to get the surgery that a lot of others have. Yes, please take a good sip of water. You will need that.
Got to keep them hydrated.
You've opted not to go for surgery, which a lot of people have done. A lot of famous people have done. How come?
Yeah, and the surgery is highly effective. I watched it being done on various people when I did a story on a vocal surgeon up in Boston. I think my initial reason for not doing it 20 years ago was that I did not feel that I could afford the 6 weeks of vocal silence that I was told I would have to undergo. The way it works is they just can't stitch a vocal cord. It's got to heal on its own. I was at a point in my life and career where I just couldn't afford that. Now, maybe I could steal that time, but I have not done so. And I think it's partly because I feel as if I feel as if all of our voices are who we are. Because because I'm not a broadcaster, I feel as if I can have a voice that has this patina, that has these nicks and scars that indicate a life of maybe a lot of talking, maybe some reckless singing, maybe, some of the stupidities that I put my voice through. I just sort of have to let those be because that's who I am now at 62 years old.
Indeed. The historian Yuval Noah Harari, we had him on our program not too long ago, and he makes the point that it is our unique ability for language that separates us from the rest of the animal kingdom. Let's, I guess, get into a bit of the science on this because you do in the book. Where do you stand on this?
I think he's absolutely right, because his larger point is it's really language that allowed this hairless, slow-running, easily predated upon animal, us, to actually win out over those creatures that could kill and eat us and eliminate us. How did we do it? Well, we did it by cooperating with each other in ingenious ways, making up plans, for instance, in order to kill that big creature that could kill us, and then we would eat that creature. We did it through making plans that we shared with one another through speech. It was really the only way that we could really overcome these obvious weaknesses of our species. So it's rather extraordinary what this has given us the ability to do. Not only do we make tools, we make very sophisticated tools that we teach each other how to make and that we teach our children to use so that they can survive. So our language is critical to our survival, but language is something that linguists describe as something that goes on up in our brain, the assembly of sentences, which we then put out through the vocal channel. And then you have to stop and say, wait, oh yes, the vocal channel. We were a species that was communicating these ideas, these thoughts, these language-based notions. How? Through our speech apparatus. And that ended up being something so important to my book because I realized that science has not talked about it. Science has taken very little interest in these specifications and refinements of our vocal instrument, literally of our anatomy, physiology, and biology for communicating speech through our mouths. And that gets into an amazingly, to my mind, interesting notion of how, in fact, it was these changes to our vocal apparatus that created language in our brain in the first place, in a feedback loop. We sort of develop these ways of refining the way our mouths and lips move and the way we can control our breath. And that, again, fed back into the brain to create our ability to make words and sentences.
Let's find out what the voice can tell us about each other. And to that end, I want to read an excerpt from your book, and here goes. The enterprise of being human, you write, is to carve out a congenial place to occupy in the world, an achievement that we know intuitively depends to a frightening extent on how our voices sound in the ears of others. To alter your voice in ways that conform better to the person you feel yourself to be, or that you wish you were, means changing, fundamentally, who you are. That's such a fascinating concept. How much can you know about somebody just from hearing that somebody's voice?
Well, you know, it's amazing. I think we know so very much. Now, we might not be able to say how tall they are. We might not be able to say, I don't know, what we can say are things very often like where they might have been born and raised, because we're hearing things in accent. We might be able to detect, and this can, make some people feel bad. We might be able to detect someone's level of education. People that went to Tony private schools often have a particular crispness to their articulation that was kind of drummed into them, for instance. We might be able to hear if someone is a little bit hostile, somewhat competitive. We might hear if someone is kind of a bit of a seductive, seducing kind of person. So in other words, we're picking up a tremendous amount sort of in a gestalt way from someone's vocal signal, but also in specific moments we're hearing things, for instance, whether or not someone is frightened and trying to cover it up, or whether or not they're hostile and trying to cover it up. Now, someone may be listening to me now and thinking, oh, gee, he's making some awfully grand claims for the voice. But if you actually think about moments in your life where you realize, oh, I was picking up so much. You remember that first date where you realized you were getting so much from that person's vocal signal. I have a moment in my book where years ago I was listening to the news about the meltdown of the subprime mortgage world and the fact that I was suddenly afraid that we were going to be living, on one of these New York, subway grates. And I was terrified. And my 9-year-old son arrived home. He couldn't see me, but I called out to him the way I do every day when we would get home. I said, "Hi, Johnny." And he said, "What's wrong?" I was trying to keep out of my voice this fear that I was feeling. He detected it in an instant. So I just think our vocal signal is giving us away a tremendous amount, and efforts to disguise it and to be a different person than we really are can actually sound phony. It can work against us.
Well, at the risk of embarrassing myself here, what does my voice tell you about me?
I think you are one of those people with kind of a crisp, very great, really fine articulation that tells me you are well-educated, well-read. You have a voice that invites people to answer you. You are not an aggressive, mansplaining person that's jumping in at every instant. You don't sound like you're going to be that way. You sound like you might have spent your life making your living being curious about people, asking well-targeted questions in a well-articulated voice that invites a person to give a response. So I would say those things immediately jump out at me.
You can also tell that I don't pack my car at Harvard Yard, so you know where I'm not from, right?
Oh, yeah, I know. I think I know where you're not from. I should have looked up where you're from so I could have sounded like incredibly good at being able to pick up geographic voices, but I'm too stupid to have done it.
I think I was born about an hour away from where you were born. Are you from Toronto originally?
I am.
Yeah, I'm from Hamilton originally.
Yeah, fantastic. I would have said, I think we sound like two Canadian guys speaking to each other, but yes.
Fascinating. You mentioned my favorite singer of all time on page 148, so I am going to ask you about Mr. Sinatra here.
Oh, great.
One of his nicknames, besides being the chairman of the board, was The Voice. And I guess he and Bing Crosby were really the first two superstar singers to understand what they could do differently with their voices when they had the power of this thing, a microphone, to sing into. Amplify on that. Well, sorry about the bad pun there, but amplify on that if you would.
You know, it's long enough ago that I wrote the book that I can't remember whether or not I left in the extensive passage about exactly what you're asking. I think it may have been cut back, so I relish being able to tell your viewers this. It's utterly fascinating. Before Sinatra and before, you know, Bing Crosby, people were singing, or I should say before radio broadcast and the electronic microphone, people were singing without electronic amplification of their voice. They needed to train themselves to be able to sing in a way that would reach the back of a hall. And what that really meant doing was making sure you sang on the vowel. Because if you really think about it, all of the melodic carrying part of any singing voice are those vowels. Fly me to the moon. So you know that you extend that moon, you keep those the M and the N very short. Because you can't hear the voice at the back of the room. Sinatra and Bing realized when they had this microphone that they could get close to, they didn't have to blow out their voice on the vowels as much. Because they could be heard singing close to a microphone, they realized they could actually hit those more intimate sounds in singing, the M's and the N's, the nasals as they're called, where the sound is really coming out of the nose, believe it or not. When we say we're really just doing the B sound, M, but we're opening up a little trapdoor at the back of our nose and making the sound come out the nose, so it softens the B into a M. So what did that mean? It meant that Sinatra could say, fly me to the moon. He could hold that, I like New York in June. Sorry for these imitations, Steve, but I had to do them. So he's holding those N's and M's. And it's fantastic because it suggests a kind of nuzzling, and I have to say kind of sexual intimacy. You know, this is the way you sing to someone when you're up close to their ear. But it did something else I really think in Sinatra more even than in Bing. Because the correct way of singing that you're taught, the kind of royal conservatory way of singing would be to hold those vowels. If you hold the N's, it's got kind of a swaggery, I'm breaking the rules here kind of a feel. It really gave Sinatra, I really believe, some of his threat, some of his like, I'm a bad boy, you know, fly me to the moon. So I think all of that was coming together in him in particular to produce that amazing vocal signal. But I do want to say that what he did with the vowels was absolutely fabulous. I mean, just the timbre of his voice, the feel of it, of what he was doing. So it wasn't just the consonants, it was those amazing sung vowels as well. What a singer.
It's Frank's world, John. We just live in it. That's what they say. We are going to remind everybody again that you are, of course, Canadian. And as you write in the book, you say, today, after more than 30 years living in the United States, I have never lost my oot and a boot, and it never fails to make me feel a bit self-conscious about how my voice is telling strangers something intimate about me. I wanted to put that on the record because you've got I think you wrote in the Walrus magazine a funny anecdote about your son, who was mocked by his classmates in New York, of course, for the way he said certain words that sounded a bit more, I guess, Canadian than New Yorkish. You want to tell that story?
Yes, I mean, it was rather amazing because our son was raised as an only child in a 2-bedroom New York apartment that's not huge, and by helicopter parents, I sort of kid, but you know, we were on top of him. So he was getting the vocal signal from his 2 Canadian parents, because my wife is from Alberta. He was getting it big time from both of us. And that really meant that by the time he was 5 years old and went off to kindergarten, you know, even though he would hear New York voices out on the street, the main vocal signal was this Canadian one. So he gets to kindergarten and he's in a classroom of New Yorkers and a schoolyard full of New Yorkers. And he is saying sorry in this particular way. It was really the word sorry. And how Canadian is it, by the way, to have been apologizing? I'm sure he picked that up from us as well, but that's a whole other story. So he was saying sorry, and he came home from school Now, he claims he wasn't in tears. I'm telling you, he was in tears. And he was saying, they're teasing me for the way I say sorry. And I noticed the way he was saying it. Now, the way Americans say it will be a little bit more like sorry. Now, I can't really do it because I'm Canadian, but there's a little bit of an A sound to my ears. Now, he did not, I'm convinced he did not set out to learn an American sorry in order to get along and go along. I really believe it just smoothly happened so that, soon he wasn't being teased, and soon I was hearing an American sound in his voice. It was an amazing example of how really, our sort of, we are not completed as human beings until we leave the nest and actually go into the schoolyard, where a tremendous amount of the shaping happens in a very Darwinian context. It's survival of the fittest. You must adapt to survive. That's literally Darwinian natural selection right there.
How old is that kid now?
Now he is 22.
And does he get how hilarious that story is today?
He does, but of course he's very mad at me for telling it in the book. Because what right do I have to be telling his stories? No, he doesn't really mind.
Good. You mentioned Darwin there, and let's finish up on that, because it's interesting. There are not too many people who are brave enough to take a poke at Noam Chomsky, but you do in this book. Even though he is a bit of a legend, you describe him as surprisingly incurious about some of the conclusions he came to about linguistics. Why don't you conclude by referencing that and then bringing the whole evolutionary angle into it as well?
Yeah, wonderful. It's interesting. Chomsky told us some of the most fascinating stuff about language and told it to us in a way that was so compelling, everybody bought it. He really said that language is this organ in our brain. We're born with all of language kind of ready to be activated in our brain. Well, I think that's true to an extent because we're human beings and we can speak. Voices clearly that we hear clearly sort of set the vocal signal into motion and we start speaking as babies. But, Chomsky left out that voice part of it. He was manifestly uninterested in how the vocal signal that we hear as babies touches off language. And that went still deeper. He was manifestly uninterested in how language, that whole linguistic thing, got into the brain in the first place. I.e., he did not believe that it evolved by natural selection. And he, in fact, said, listen, we can't know how it got there, so there's really no question, there's no really point in investigating it. Now, he actually said at one point that it might be just because we have so many neurons that are packed into a basketball-sized skull. Steven Pinker, a huge fan of Chomsky, said, that explanation is so bizarre. It's like saying that wind could sweep through a junkyard and assemble a 747 just by chance. In other words, all of those neurons are not going to kind of just happen to link up in a way that gives us this exquisitely complex thing called language. So actually, Chomsky had a rival scientist who was initially a Chomskyite. He was his student, a guy named Philip Lieberman. Lieberman was suspicious of this notion that language, and get this, Chomsky said that language it sort of developed in us, not as a means of communication. Already I'm hearing everybody gasping. No, not as a means of communication, but as a silent means of thought. That in fact we developed language for thinking out ideas, which we only then delivered through this vocal, apparatus. I mean, I just have to say, I think it's kind of ludicrous. It leaves out this idea that we were developing all of these anatomical changes. What were they? Well, I won't bore listeners, but our larynx descended in our throat so we can give a full range of vowels. We actually developed, I love this bit, this incredible turbocharged motor part of our brain called the basal ganglia that allows me right now to be doing an almost blindingly fast gymnastic acrobatic thing with my lips and tongue, where I'm hitting very specific targets with the back of my tongue, with the tip of my tongue, where I put it to say s and t and duh. I mentioned that trap door that's rapidly opening and closing to make me say buh or muh. I'm doing that all in a stream of super fast communication called sentence speaking or language. We can only do it because of a genetic mutation on a gene called FOXP2. I won't bore you, but we have 2 of these mutations that we developed over the last 6 million years, which is a blink of an eye in evolutionary terms, since we departed actually from chimps as our species broke off and developed. Those 2 mutations are enabling me to do what no other animal can do, except incredibly birds, because we discovered their FOXP2 is similar. And that's why my parakeet, who I've had to lock in my bathroom, by the way, my parakeet can actually mimic my speech. I guess what I'm saying is that we did develop like specialized aspects of our vocal instrument, including even our breathing, because we have to slow down our exhalations because we speak our sentences on an exhale that no other animal does. So Chomsky was uninterested in those changes. Philip Lieberman was manifestly fascinated by them and gave us all of these wonderful insights into how all of these changes fed back again into our brain and created, in effect, this language organ that Chomsky speaks of. I mean, he was exactly right in saying we have specialized areas of the brain that are inborn. I had them when I was born, so did you. But really, they were not only activated by our parental speech, but they were created in the first place by these wonderful changes to our voice, all of which enables me to say, in conclusion, really that the voice created not just language, but it means it created us. At the beginning, we talked about how, this ability to talk enabled us to outsmart creatures that would have rendered us extinct. So I think I can really conclude by saying our voice created us as human beings, and that's the secret theme of my book.
Well, I am grateful for 3 things as we wrap this up. Number 1, I'm grateful for this book because I so enjoyed it. It was such a fascinating read. I'm grateful you could spare so much time for us on TVO tonight. But most of all, I'm grateful your voice held out for this whole interview because you've done a lot of talking over the last half an hour, and you made it, John. You made it. Well done. John, so great to meet you, and stay safe and be well.
Thanks, you too.
And that is the agenda for Thursday, June 17th, 2021. With a whole new cohort of people becoming eligible for their 2nd vaccine dose this week, tomorrow, Nam Kiwanuka finds out what that translates to for those who've gotten the jab and those still waiting. I'm Steve Paikin. Thanks for watching TVO, for joining us online at tvo.org. And Nam, we'll see you here tomorrow.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.